Okay, so I wrote comparing fractions on the board, and I want you to take some time to think about the numbers, the symbols, or words that you associate with this term. Um, so just kind of think about what you remember from third grade when it comes to fractions. And if you're having a hard time thinking of it, you can use this sentence stem to help you. It says, when I think of comparing fractions, I think of blank. So you can fill that in with whatever comes to your mind. Okay? So when I think of fractions and I think about third grade, what we all learned in third grade, I think about the greater than, the less than, and the equal to sign associated with comparing fractions. This is greater than, less than, and equal to. Okay? And what we learned in third grade is how to compare unit fractions. We also learned how to compare fractions with the same numerator and denominator. And if you think of anything else, it's great. Okay? So now, has anybody ever played the game War? I have. It's pretty fun. And for this game, you need two people and a deck of cards. Okay? You and your partner are going to split that deck of cards into two. Okay? And you're going to pull from the top of your deck, each of you, and whoever has the higher number is the winner. Okay? And this relates to fractions. How? We're going to actually be able to create our own deck of cards and using fractions. And whoever has the larger fraction is the person that's going to win. Okay? So, as a class, we're going to brainstorm a couple of possibilities of fractions that we remember or that we're familiar with. Okay? So, let me erase this. So I'm going to create a couple of fractions that you can include in your deck of cards, okay? 1/2. Okay. Let's see what else. 1/3. 1/4. And then kind of change it up. 3/8. Like I said, we learned about comparing unit fractions in third grade, right? These three are unit fractions. So that's something that we're familiar with. So we're going to use those in our game, okay? So these are what your cards can look like, your fraction cards. That's 1/8, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and 3/4. Okay? You can have any fractions that you want as long as they're fractions. I'm going to demonstrate how the game is played using the deck of cards. And in the deck of cards, they are whole numbers. Like I said, we're going to be using fractions, our index cards that we created. We're going to use these, okay? But I'm going to demonstrate how you play the game. Okay. So after you're done creating your cards, we'll go over what are some different ways to determine which fraction is larger, okay? One way that you can determine if which fraction is larger is by drawing models, drawing pictures. I'm a visual learner, and I know some of you are as well. So pictures always are a great way to help you visualize the concept. Okay? So say you have 1/2 and 1/4. Okay? This is a pretty easy way to tell which one is larger. Okay? So 1/2 compared to 1/4. If you look at the picture, most of the 1/2 is colored. The 1/2 is colored. And the 1/4 portion is less than the 1/2 portion. Okay? So 1/2 is greater than 1/4. And the way that I like to remember the greater than and the less than sign is the alligator is always going to want the larger number. The alligator is always going to want the larger portion of food, okay? So you want his mouth pointing to that larger portion of food, okay? So that is one way that I've been able to remember which the greater than and the less than sign. Okay, so like I said, I was going to demonstrate how you play war using whole numbers. You will be using your fraction index cards that you created with your partner, okay? You will be using those, but I'm going to demonstrate how you're going to play the game using whole cards, okay? So, say I have 8. Pulled it off my first deck. I have 8. And my partner pulls 5. Which number is larger, 8 or 5? Okay? So 8 is larger than 5, right? So I'm going to take my 8 and my 5. And I'm going to make sure that the alligator is eating the larger number. Well, the larger portion, right? Okay. Ta-da. So 8 is greater than 5, and that's how you'll read that, okay? Or you can read it 5 is less than 8. Both of those are correct, okay? So whoever has the larger number, the larger fraction, is a person that gets to take that point. At the end of the game, you're going to figure out, tally up who has the most fractions that were larger, and that's the person that wins the game, okay? So you're going to have to create a recording sheet. You and your partner need your own, because in this first column you're going to write my fraction. In the second column you're going to write my partner's fraction. And in the third column is your justification, okay? And justification is like a fancy word for your reasoning, explanation, okay? So there's that. So after you're done doing that, we can just discuss and go over the strategies that you came up with to help you with comparing the fractions, okay? So for this next part, you will need a sheet of paper, your interactive notebook if you have it, and we're going to be using these notes, fill in the blank notes, to help us understand comparing fractions. And we're going to be learning new ways to compare fractions throughout the lesson, okay? But first, we're going to review unit fractions, comparing two unit fractions, comparing common denominators, and fractions that compare common numerators, okay? So I'm going to use fraction strips. Like I said, I'm a visual learner, so are many of you. So for the first example of unit fractions, and we're going to fill in the notes as we go. For the first one, we have 1/3 1/3 compared to 1/4. Okay, we have to see which one is larger, 1/3 or 1/4. What is your guess? Okay, so I have my 1/3 and I have my 1/4 on the board. You can see this. Hopefully it stays on there. Okay. So looking at 1/3 compared to 1/4, which one is larger? My 1/3 is larger than 1/4. Okay? So therefore, 1/3 is greater than 1/4. Let's write that in our notes, comparing fractions notes. So your 1/3, your greater than sign is going to be pointing, the mouth is going to be open to 1/3. And I'm going to write this on the board as well, just in case it's bigger. Okay. One-third is larger than 1/4. You also can read this as 1/4 is less than 1/3. Okay, on your notes, the next blank, common blank, look at the denominators are the same in that, okay? So in that blank, common denominators, that's what you're going to write in that blank. Make sure I'm spelling it correctly. Okay, common denominators. So we learned how to compare common denominators in 3rd grade, and we're going to do an example problem for review, okay? So I'm going to write 2/4 and 1/4. Compare it to 1/4. I'm going to get my fraction strips. So 1/4. I wish I had bigger fraction strips so y'all can see them better. And 2/4. So yes, they are both fourths, but we're comparing 1/4 to 2/4. Okay. So looking at the board, which one is larger? 1/4 or 2/4? 2/4. Okay. So we want the alligator. The alligator wants to eat the bigger number. The alligator wants the food that has more food. Okay, just like me. Okay, I want more food than less food. Okay, so 2/4 is greater than 1/4. Let me write that. And this is how yours should look on your notes. Okay. And then in 3rd grade, we learned about comparing common numerators. Okay, so that's our top number. In our example that we have, we're comparing 2/4 to 2/3. Okay, 2/4 to 2/3. Let me write that on the board so you all can see. 2/4 to 2/3. The numerators are the same, so the top number is the same. Okay. So I'm going to get my fraction strips. This is 1/4. I need 2 of them. And this is my other 4th, my second 4th. Okay. So that's my 2/4. And then I need 2/3. So this is 1/3. Okay. I need another one to make 2/3. And this is 1/3. So having both 1/3 plus 1/3 is 2/3. Okay. So when we look at our fraction strips, which one is larger? Okay. So this is 1/3 plus 1/3. That equals 2/3. So 2/3 is larger than 2/4. Okay. So the alligator is going to want to eat the larger number, right? So we said 2/3 is greater than 2/4. We want more food, so we have to have our mouth open to the larger fraction. Okay, so this is what yours should look like on your notes. And we also can read this as 2/4 is less than 2/3. Okay. So So we understand that those strategies, those three strategies are something that we can use when comparing fractions. Throughout this lesson, we're going to learn a couple more strategies to help us with comparing fractions, okay? So, benchmark fractions is an easy way to compare fractions mentally, okay? So on your notes, I want you to write benchmark. Okay, so benchmark fractions. It's easy to visualize mentally. So mentally means in your mind. So these are the numbers or the fractions that we can kind of remember off the top of our head what those look like. And those three fractions or numbers is 0. Let's see, write that. 0, 1/2, and 1. I can visualize 0 in my head. 0, there means nothing, there's nothing there. 1/2, I can visualize 1/2, half of something, okay? And also I can visualize a whole, one whole, okay? So benchmark fractions are just an easy way, those easy numbers that we can visualize in our minds, okay? So we're going to do 2 examples with using benchmark fractions. Okay, I'm going to create my line right here. Okay, we have 0, 1/2, and then 1. Okay, so I created like a number line, a benchmark fraction with 0, 1/2, and 1. So the first example that we're going to use, 4/8 is blank 1/2. So we have to figure out if 4/8 we're going to, so our first example, so what is 4/8 closer to? Either 0, 1/2, or 1. Let's pull out some fraction strips. Let me get my 4/8 out. Like I said, I wish these were bigger. Okay. There's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. Move them closer together. Okay. Now let me get out. We're trying to figure out, is it closer to 0, 1/2, or 1? This is my 1. And I'm going to show you in a second when I put these on here. Okay. And then, is it closer to 1/2? Or is it closer to 0? We don't need anything for 0. Because 0 is 0. Okay. So. So. Okay. So my 4/8 is equivalent to my half. It's equal to my half. So it's closer to my 1/2. It's actually exactly 1/2. Okay? So on my notes, I'm going to write 4/8 is exactly 1/2. Okay? The next one. We're going to do comparing 4/8 to 2/3. So one, 2, and then this is 4. I included a sheet of like the fraction strips sheet. Basically what I have right here. I included this if you want to print it out, if you need that visual and to be able to actually lay them out, okay? So we have 4/8. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're comparing that to 2/3. So 1, 2. Okay? And you can color code them like how I have them. Okay? So looking at these on here, which one is larger? 4/8 or 2/3? 1, 2, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 2/3 is larger than 4/8. It's greater than. So, as you remember, we want to eat more food, okay? We want the larger portion of food. So our mouth is going to open to the 2/3. Yep. fill that in on your note. And as we remember, 2/8 is exactly 1/2, okay? So you can even look at the fraction strip and compare 1/2 to 2/3. Which one is larger? The 2/3, okay? So on your notes, it says larger than 1/2. So 2/3 is larger than 1/2. Okay. Next part. So that's benchmark fractions. Numbers, fractions that we can easily visualize in our mind. Okay. The next one we're going to go over is equivalent fractions after we watch this video. It's a YouTube video that kind of goes over benchmark fractions and how they work, and they give you a few examples to help you practice, okay? So you can practice on a dry erase board, like something I have, or you can practice on a sheet of paper, anything. You can use the fraction strips right here to help you if you need to visually see it, or if you want to be able to move the fraction strips as you go. All those ways are ways that you can practice, okay? But the next part we're going to go over is equivalent fractions. And on your notes, lovely notes, equivalent fractions are fractions that are, that magic word, equal, but they have different numerators and denominators. Okay? They're equal, but they have different numerators and denominators. Okay? So, like I said, you can use this. You can use this chart to help you. Okay? So, for the first example, we're going to do 1/2 compared to 4/8. And you can use the fraction strips, but we're going to move on and we're going to see, what do we notice and wonder? What do we notice? Like, what do we see? I noticed, I'm going to write these. Write them vertically, so see them a little bit better. Okay. How did we get from 2 to 8? Like, what could we do to get from 2 to 8? We can multiply by 4, because 2 times 4 equals 8. Okay, how can we get from 1 to 4? What can we do to get from 1 to 4? We can multiply 1 times 4. What do you notice? Ooh. We multiplied we multiplied the denominator by 4, and we also multiplied the numerator by 4. Okay? So that is exactly what equivalent fractions are. Multiplying the numerator and the multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So that number so happened in this example to be times 4. Okay? Okay, so we're going to do the second example, and this one is on your notes. I just noticed that the first one was not. So this one is on your notes. That one's like an introduction, okay? So this one, 1/2 compared to 2/4. Okay? Okay, I'm gonna write it vertically to make it easier to multiply or whatever you come up with. Okay. What did you do to get from 1 to 2? What could you do? Multiply. You can multiply 1 times 2 to get 2. Can we do the same? Can we use times 2 for our denominator? Can we say 2 times 2 gives you 4? Yes. Yes. So equivalent fractions have this type of pattern. Something that, yeah, they have this pattern. So you can take your first fraction and multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So let's write that in our notes. They're equivalent, so they're equal to each other. Okay, so let's write it. And that first example was equal as well, equivalent. Okay, so you're going to fill in the blank with multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. Okay, that's where you're writing in your notes right here. Okay. One more example. This is not on your notes, but this is for practice and to kind of see if there is an actual pattern, or am I just assuming? Okay, so let's try 1/2 compared to what? For this one, we're actually going to look for, if I want to keep that same pattern, and I decide, I'm going to multiply these both times 2. Both times 6, sorry. So for this example, I have 1/2. If I want to keep that same pattern of multiplying the numerator and the denominator with the same number, what would I get from that? Okay, so I'm going to multiply 1 times 6, and I'll get 6. Then I'm going to multiply 2 times 6, and I'll get 12. So that means that 1/2 is equal to 6/12. So there's a pattern. That's our pattern right here. Okay. The last strategy that we're going to be doing are learning about is creating common denominators. Okay, so I'm going to write 3/7 compared to 2/8. Okay, and I can use my fraction strips if I need to visualize it and be able to check my answer, or if I need to draw a model, like you can do that, okay? First starting off, that would be a great way to check your work and make sure that you're on the correct track, okay? So can we use benchmark fractions with this? Would that be the best strategy to use? Probably not. These numbers are both less than half, and they're not close to 0. You won't know which one is closer to 0. It's not the easiest way to do that, okay? So we can create common denominators, and we're going to use 3/7 and 2/8 to see which one is greater, okay? So look at the denominators, which the denominators are at the bottom. Okay. You're going to make sure I'm saying this correctly. You're going to multiply the other fraction by that denominator. So I'm going to take the denominator in 3/7, which is 7, and I'm going to multiply that times 8 on the top and the bottom. I'm going to multiply the 7. Okay? And then on the other side, I'm going to take that denominator from 2/8, so my denominator is 8, and I'm going to multiply that, my 2/7, by my denominator on the other side. Okay? And then we're just going to simply just multiply them. Let's see if we can create common denominators. Let's see if the denominators are going to be the same when we multiply. Okay. So 3 times 8 is 24. 7 times 8 is 56. Okay. And then on the other side, we have 2 times 7 is 14, and 8 times 7 is 56. So are the denominators the same? Yes, they're both 56, okay? Are the numerators the same? No. Which numerator is larger? 24, because 24 is larger than 14. So the alligator or Miss Thomas is going to want to eat the larger portion. Okay, so let's make sure our mouth is pointing like this. Okay, but we have to make sure that we're answering our question. You're always going to go back to those original 2 fractions, okay? So our original 2 fractions were 3/7 compared to 2/8, okay? So that's why it's important to show your work so you can keep it organized and you can remember, you'll know, okay, well, this goes with this and this goes with this, okay? So make sure you write that down. Okay. So 2/7 is greater than 2/8. And I'm going to show you on the board as well. Make sure you record that in your notes. Okay. So now there are 3 practice problems that you're going to do. I'm going to show you on my sheet. Just so you can get familiar, you're going to use one of the 5 strategies, okay? So it could be the 3 review strategies that we went over earlier. So like unit fractions, common denominators, common numerators, or the other 2 that we just kind of learned, okay? Benchmark fractions or create common fractions. And remember, equivalent fractions could be a part of one of these problems that you're going over. So you can use your notes to help you. And the instructions say compare the fractions, use greater than, less than, or equal to, okay? Or equal. Check with a partner when finished. Then with your partner, circle the phrase that makes the sentence stem true and fill in the blanks with the fractions, okay? So that is something that you can do independently or you can do with a partner. Once you complete those 3, you can glue in your comparing fraction notes. And there will be an answer key with this, just so you can check your answers as well, okay?